Hello friends, welcome to the channel. It is Fellowship release day and I think we're all struggling a little bit. So while I'm waiting here in queue to get back into the game, as we're all traveling to the stronghold, so to speak, I would like to take just a moment to summarize several of the major changes that happened to Mara from the open beta coming into the early access release. There are a few changes that have happened, some minor talent changes, some more major systemic changes, and a few different things. So I'll be going over everything that I believe has been documented and some undocumented, starting with some of the system changes. So there's been one major change in all of Fellowship, and that is that damage over time effects no longer are snapshotting. This mainly affects Mara and it mainly affects Ardeos. For Mara specifically, this means that your bleeds, you could have snapshotted your Maiden of Death onto your bleeds, which means that your bleeds are doing 20% more damage, and that is no longer a thing. So this might look like a nerf on paper for bleed builds, but to compensate for that, they actually buffed Hemorrhaging Strike by about 20% to make up for that lost snapshotting effect. Now this just means that when you apply your bleeds, especially during your maiden window, you're going to be doing more damage than what your bleeds were doing in the open beta. The next thing I want to cover are a few of the base toolkit changes. So this is going to be like Mara's normal abilities. So we have a few changes here. Some of these are more minor, like tooltip changes. So the minor ones are Brooding Shadows and Widow's Bite have a tooltip update that now indicates that they scale, their cooldowns scale with the more haste you have. So this was happening before on the open beta, but it wasn't actually clearly stated in the tooltip. So this is just kind of updating the tooltip to show that this is actually what is happening. So don't think that haste suddenly got really strong. This scaling was already present. It's just now clearly stated. I already mentioned that Hemorrhaging Strike got a bit of a change with the 20% damage buff, but that's pretty much it for Hemorrhaging Strike. Just a 20% damage buff to the dot component. And the final change that happened is the most major on Mara's base toolkit, and that's her ultimate got slightly tweaked. The first thing that happened is while Matriarch Macabre is active, you're going to be dealing a 20% increase in damage. So that's just a flat damage increase for things like your bleeds, things like hemotoxin, things like your finishers, just a flat 20% increase across the board. The other thing to note is that your clones during your ultimate, they now only replicate 50% of your finisher damage, whereas before they were doing 100% of the damage. This might seem like a nerf, and I guess it kind of is if you're playing like a hemotoxin build, but not really at the same time. But even though this is nerfed to 50%, there is a new component that I don't think is clearly stated here that makes this ultimate extremely powerful now. This change is that your clones now benefit from any finisher modifier you had when you casted the finisher. So this means if you have a deadly scheme proc for 100% crit, when you use your finisher during the ultimate, all of your clones are also going to get the crit for that one particular finisher. So this means if you use like one Queen's Fang, it's going to be guaranteed a critical strike for Mara's Queen Fang, and then the two clones Queen's Fang as well. This is a massive damage buff for the finisher build, and it makes this ultimate extremely strong. The ultimate is now extremely powerful. It is a massive burst of damage, and I'm very happy to see this change come through. All right, now we're going to be jumping into a few of the talent changes. The first thing to note, and the major one that we've kind of all been asking for, is that Deadly Scheme now has a tracking component. So previously it would just suddenly trigger the buff whenever you had 200 energy generated. Now every time you generate 10 energy, you gain 1 stack of Deadly Scheme, and at 20 stacks of this buff, so the same amount, once you recover 200 energy, you will activate the buff. So this is just a new way to actually track the current state of Deadly Scheme. So it makes this so much easier to use. The next thing that changed is a rework for the way Efficient Killer worked. Previously, this just made it so that your finishers were just a little bit more energy efficient, and you also had an additional, or you had more maximum energy. Now, the way Efficient Killer is going to work is each time you spend a combo point, you generate 1 energy per combo point spent. This increases the value of Efficient Killer because it now actually functions and synergizes with Deadly Scheme, giving this talent a little bit more emphasis and something worth considering to take. Next up, we have Veil of Shadows. This previously was giving you an additional 2 seconds on your defensive while also granting you 100% dodge chance. This has been slightly reworked to now give you 8 seconds on your defensive, and it reduces magic damage you're going to take while your defensive is active by an additional 10%. So there might be some fights where there's a ton of magic damage going out. This really might be an option to consider in those fights, but we'll have to see. Next up, we have Feed the Queen. This is, again, another finisher build talent modifier. And this got nerfed from giving you 15% per stack of Queen's Fang down to 10%. So just kind of nerfing the priority damage a little bit on finisher builds. And then the final talent change is with Hemotoxin. So Hemotoxin got a little bit more AoE damage. It now does 70% of Hemorrhaging Strike's bleed effect. And because Hemorrhaging Strike is already going to be doing more damage, this means that Hemotoxin is doing more single target damage, and it's also doing more AoE damage now. And finally, Mara has a couple legendary changes to note. First is the legendary boots are being nerfed slightly. I think in the open beta, they were doing 45% of any finisher critical strike as an additional poison damage over time effect. That 45% then got buffed up to 60%, and it's being nerfed back down to 40%. In addition, we also have the legendary cape get a little bit of a buff. During the open beta, the expertise granted on a spirit refund was 25% additional expertise. Now it's going to be 32%, making the cloak a little bit more competitive with the legendary boots. And then we also got to see the third legendary, which is, I think this is a neck, if I'm not mistaken, but this is a kind of cooldown reduction legendary effect on Final Stratagem. Every time you spend a combo point, you reduce Final Stratagem's cooldown by half a second per combo point spent. So this is going to give us a little bit more utility throughout the dungeon, maybe getting a few more stuns. It's going to allow us to get a few more maidens and just overall be a little bit more of a versatile class if you have this legendary. As far as the preferred legendary, it's still going to be the legendary boots, I believe, but the cloak is still fairly powerful and a pretty solid option. I'm not too sure how this new legendary effect is going to work, but for now, I would say, if possible, you really want to use the other two options as of right now. And then what do we expect for the preferred build to play at the moment? Well, according to some of the sims that have been coming out, it looks like the finisher build is kind of top dog in terms of damage at the moment. This is a harder build to pilot. The bleed and poison builds aren't that far behind, but they are still noticeably behind. So if you have a hard time playing the Malevolence or finisher build, then you still should be viable. It should still be viable to play the bleed builds, but you're probably, if you want to stay competitive, you're probably going to want to learn the finisher build. But that's going to wrap up all the updates that Mara got in between open beta and the early access release. Let me know down in the comments how you feel about a few of these changes, as overall, I'm pretty happy with them. But that's going to be it for me. This was GooberTroy. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.